You are now rocking with BizMode. Let's get into BizMode. What is BizMode? BizMode is entrepreneurship at its highest level. BizMode is flow state. BizMode is that hunger pain you feel. BizMode is success by your own definition. BizMode is operating from abundance. BizMode is what you make it. This is BizMode. What up, though? I am your host, Alex Bruno. I am the founder of Bruno Group Inc., a California law firm helping entrepreneurs and businesses with their legal stuff. What's up, family? Alex Bruno here, and welcome back to BizMode. I'm excited to introduce Miki Reynolds. Miki is a co-founder and executive director of Grid110. Grid110 is an early-stage startup accelerator that was founded over 6 years ago. I see Grid110 and Miki as being instrumental in elevating the Los Angeles startup space and on developing and shining a light on founders who are women and people of color. Miki has long been an advocate for Los Angeles and the startup community, and I personally appreciate all she has done to bring the focus back on the City of Angels. In this episode, Miki provides us with a lot of gems, but I'll only highlight two so you can get your own. As an entrepreneur or founder, you will be challenged and be hit hard at times. Pandemic or not, this will happen. And Miki reminds you that it's okay to give yourself grace, and you got to do it. And second, all of us need to remember that focus and prioritization are the key to a successful product, successful business, or a successful service. Well, enough about my gems. Please tune into my chat and tell me about yours. Let's go on to the episode. Thanks for listening. Miki, welcome to BizMode.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to be here. I'm really thrilled for you to be here. And, you know, just for, I said the uninitiated, tell our listeners and our viewers about Grid110.
Sure. So Grid110 is a nonprofit organization I co-founded in 2015 with 6 other individuals, all of us who lived or worked in downtown LA, really saw downtown as the potential to be the next tech startup hub in Los Angeles and wanted to do something about building community there. So over the past 6 years, we've essentially just done that. So we run startup accelerator programs, providing community, education, resources, for entrepreneurs, connecting them to all the different things that they need to figure out how to either start a business or grow their business. Our founders are anywhere from idea stage, so back of a napkin idea, have something that they're excited about working on, but don't have the first idea about how to actually launch a business. How do I validate this as a business concept? And all the way through companies that have launched, have some traction, customers' revenue, maybe a little bit of early funding, and are looking just to get to the next stage of whatever their business milestones are for them. And so we run a cohort-based model, working with about 20 founders at a given time, a couple of times a year. We've now just onboarded our most recent fall cohort of 17 companies. So this brings us to 180 companies that we've worked with over the past 6 years. 70% of the companies are led by a female founder, a woman, and about 67% are founders that are people of color. So really what we feel truly reflects what the city of Los Angeles actually looks like, even down to the types of businesses that they're building.
And that's really cool because it's a different perception from what I've seen, and then we kind of talked offline a little bit of what a traditional startup looks like, and sometimes it's the founders. There's a certain I've said it before, you got the tech bro, and so it's kind of cool. No disrespect, but it's kind of cool to see that the city of Los Angeles is a diverse city. We live in a diverse state when you look at our state overall, and it's great to see Grid110 doing that. One thing that I wanted to bring up, and we talked about this already. And I know it's a question you get a lot, but I think it's really important to highlight because people don't hear this a lot, is that what you do, you did mention you're a nonprofit, is that you don't take equity in the company. So you don't have a stake in the company. And what I mean by that is like an equity ownership stake. So tell me about that and tell me, why was that important?
Sure. So when we first started the organization, we started as a nonprofit, but there were really no thoughts around how we would monetize this. It was something that we just felt needed to exist. We wanted to solve problems. We wanted to support entrepreneurs. We wanted to build community, and so there weren't really any thinking about how will we charge the companies for this. We felt really strongly that we could get other entities and stakeholders to support us to provide these types of programs for free, which has proven to be true. So we're different from other accelerator programs in that we are a nonprofit organization. We don't take equity. We don't charge the founders to participate, but we also don't provide them with funding. So typically, when you see that there's some sort of an entity taking an equity stake in a company, it's because there is some trade for money or capital or something like that. Because equity, to me, when it comes to like equity in a company, it equates to ownership. And so you're giving away a piece of your ownership in return for X amount of dollars. And I personally want to see founders retain as much ownership of their company as possible for as long as possible. And I think especially when we're talking about underrepresented communities, Black and Latinx founders, where the retention of ownership in their company can equate to potentially generational wealth, economic mobility, so many different things that are really vital for these communities to have. And so I think the expectation of equity is that it's going to mean something. It's going to result in some sort of gain in the future, right? Which only happens if there is an acquisition or an IPO. So I think there are very few companies where that makes sense for, that transaction makes sense for. And I think it's equity and in exchange for capital, makes sense if you're trying to go through rapid growth. But I think that there are so many other ways that you can actually grow your company. And so for us, it's like, how can we support these founders at the earliest stages of their businesses, help them figure out the pathways that make sense for them. Some of these companies, venture capital and then exchanging equity for that capital makes sense for them. But there are other pathways that we want to also support our founders through.
Right. No, and I think it's great to reemphasize that and to emphasize that, you don't have to, even though that's a traditional model or that's the one that's heavily focused on in terms of giving up equity in your company, you can be successful without like basically giving away a lot of your company in exchange either for capital or for something else. I also like it for what you're doing as an accelerator because it kind of takes you out of the incentive mode, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so some of these accelerators, their whole point is, can we get you to the next funding event, because that's going to get us one step closer for our benefit as
Right.
an accelerator. And it's great to have that impartiality, because I know as a business attorney, I've been approached of like, well, we'll give you a stake in your company if you do your services for us. And I'm like, well, that'd be great if you get to that stage of IPO or major acquisition. But let me tell you as well, it changes what I do, which is to tell you this might not be a good deal for you, because all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden my view changes. So I think it's really good to see it like from what you're doing, because it does, you are able to provide something that's kind of in a way unbiased and more for the benefit of the founders, as opposed to some kind of little benefit that you might receive.
Yeah, and I would say I think our programs are on par with some of the other programs that take equity and provide funding and do other things. I think we are still invested in the success of our
Right.
founders because of the things that will mean for them, of the things that will mean for our organization as a brand, who we'll be able to work with afterwards. Actually, I had a conversation with one of our alumni founders who is in the middle of raising some additional money. And I've been kind of like helping her with introductions and connections. And she just told me, she's like, you're like one of our best investors that doesn't have an equity stake in our company. She's like, I can't believe this program is free. And it's a huge compliment, I think, just,
Right.
to the way that we will support our founders without an expectation of getting something back from them, because we just ultimately believe in them. And we feel like you are the person to do this. We want to see your company succeed. This needs to exist in the world.
No, I think that's great. It's great to that's a the like the perfect testimonial.
It is.
I mean that's super cool. Speaking of like your kind of like you mentioned a past alumni, a past founder. The big question now, because we're recording this in October, and it is still a COVID question, right? So
Mhm.
how have some of your companies that you've worked with, how have they pivoted because of COVID?
Yeah. So I think at the onset, it was, a huge drop for a lot of companies just in trying to figure out, sales channels either completely changed or went, missing altogether. We had a founder who specifically worked in fashion, selling, e-commerce tuxedos and formal wear. And his primary customer, like every year was his best time of year was for prom. And with no proms happening, with weddings not happening, like his business kind of disappeared overnight. And so he had to really think, and he went, as many businesses did, into selling masks or just really trying to focus on, are there relief efforts that are, can at least hold me over until I can figure out what to do next. We had companies that if they had a brick and mortar presence were obviously being affected. If they were a restaurant, a retail location, or just like an office, and having to figure out, what to do next. And I think that there was just a lot of unknowns about how long this was going to last and the kind of stops and starts to all of the safer at home orders. And so a lot of the businesses really just look to, do we have a strong online component to what we're doing, and can we increase that? Can we focus on a new type of customer that seems to be needing what we're doing right now? Do we pivot our business altogether because the current customers that we do have, there's a better way to support them? We had a company, it's a B2B company called Finley. They're a fintech company. They basically provide kind of the underlying back-end support for brick and mortar, when you think about like daycare, schools, activity centers, places that typically like kids would sign up for classes. They didn't have a proper enrollment or payment system. And so Finley came along and was powering all of that for them. But when these businesses had to shut down, they were ultimately losing customers. So Finley essentially pivoted their platform. They were still the back-end provider, but then helping these businesses go online. And if they were a karate studio, can you teach karate classes, through Zoom or through a virtual platform? Can we help you connect with customers like corporations who are looking for team building activities and events? And so being really creative in that way of, they don't want to lose business, but they don't want their customers to lose business. And so just seeing, I think, the creativity and the innovation that can come out of this time, we saw businesses that were born out of this. So one of the companies that we worked with in our summer South LA cohort was a pandemic-born business. They're a company called On The Go LA, and they basically are a food truck as a service. So I think early in the pandemic days when, people were staying at home, restaurants were shut down, somebody had tweeted out this image of "Dear taco trucks, please consider cruising neighborhoods like the ice cream trucks used to do. Sincerely, everyone." And they saw that and they're like, oh, there's an opportunity here. People are at home, they can't get to food. Restaurants are shut down, they're losing business. Can we provide a way to get restaurant owners out and selling food to people, bringing the food to where they are? So they launched this food truck business, and restaurants, typically mom and pop restaurants, can rent the food truck by a day and go out into different neighborhoods to sell the food. So they're not having to invest the upfront costs into their own food truck. They can just do it for a day. The company helps with marketing. They've done a lot of really cool things and just really trying to focus specifically on neighborhoods and communities that could utilize these types of services and the businesses that are really hurting from this. So I think those types of things have been really exciting for me to see, of who is being creative and creating solutions with these problems that have risen up.
That's super cool. Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, I mean, it's great how people are so resilient and, like you said, creative. So that's really super cool. I'm just like I already want to get on my phone, but that's not appropriate given that we're recording.
Take the notes and follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, that's what right. Like On The Go LA. Okay, got it. Food truck as a service. Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So let's stay in that COVID space for a second, because the cool thing about Grid110 is that you had this programming, and some of the programming wasn't virtual. So now we got COVID where we can't get together. So how have you as an organization adjusted to it?
Yep. So none of our programming was virtual prior to March. We were very adamant about building community in person, having, in-person programs. We talked about, would we ever want to consider doing video-based courses or doing things virtually, the reach that could have. But I think what we had seen in the 5 years of doing this was just the organic conversations and relationships and the things that transpire when you're in the same room with somebody. But obviously that was put to a screeching stop, and it was actually right before our spring program launched. So our spring program was set to kick off the first week of April. And then we all know what happened in mid-March. So we saw that coming and just said, we don't know how long this is going to be. We actually made the decision prior to the city, to Mayor Garcetti issuing the safer at home order. We just didn't want to be dependent upon things out of our control with this looming ahead of us, and said, let's just make the decision. It looks like some schools are starting to use Zoom for this. Like, we should do the same thing. And can we, I think the unknown was, can we essentially run the same quality of program in a virtual environment? And so I think the first cohort that we ran, it was tough. It was the start of the pandemic. So I think a lot of people were like, when do you think we'll be able to meet in person? And we're like, we don't know. We're just doing the best that we can to do this. And I think that fortunately Zoom enabled us to really not miss a beat. And I think it just forced us as a team to be more proactive in terms of planning sessions, making sure that we had everything time boxed, that we were utilizing our time properly, that the team was communicating. So it was a lot more work on our end, but we felt like we were able to pull off, a really high quality program. I think it was still difficult because, again, it kicked off with the pandemic and health concerns and economic concerns, and the program literally ended with the civil unrest and the racial injustice and everything that was happening at the end of May and June. And so this group of 20 companies, all of them just felt everything, and we were with them, and it was creating space and talking about those types of things of reinforcing, especially because I think about 25% of the companies in that cohort were Black-owned companies. It was reinforcing our stance around Black Lives Matter, and that we really stand for inclusivity and equity, and we want to make sure that we provide these types of opportunities to founders that need it the most. And sometimes that just meant, being someone to listen to and talking through what experiences were like. And I think that's a really important part of the program that we run, is seeing the companies as the humans behind them, and the individual founders and the people that are living these day-to-day things. And we can talk about economics and, all the different acronyms about, what makes a successful business. But I think if you're not in the right headspace, if you are dealing with, just everything that we've had to deal with for the past 6 months and not really able to discuss that, talk about that, just kind of sit in it for a moment. I think that's been a really important element of what our team has been able to provide, is these types of spaces to just listen if needed, and to understand that sometimes business can't go on as usual.
Right. And I think what you brought up in terms of, it seems like in a interesting way, the injustices that were going on and forcing these talks to happen kind of helped you with the concern of building community.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like that might have helped.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were definitely aspects of this cohort, I think, coming together around that, people feeling supported, connecting in ways that they probably didn't imagine connecting with each other. And that's the thing that we always love to see. Not necessarily, the cause of it, but when we hear about, companies that, founders that stay connected after the program. I actually just talked to one of our alumni companies yesterday. They were in the fall program last year, so a year ago. They have met weekly for the past year, about 6 or 7 of the companies, and they just check in with each other. Wow. And, as an accountability group. So they've now seen each other through some marriages, proposals, 2 weddings, starting of businesses, ending of businesses, new jobs, just a bunch of different things. So I think just that the importance of finding your community, and that I think it's such a unique thing that comes out of these types of cohort-driven models. We've had people that have met their best friends, have met business partners. No love stories just yet, but I imagine that'll happen someday. But I think that's one of the great things, because community is such a pillar. It's one of our core values. It's an element that we hold really important, is that, that you come into this place probably wanting to focus on your business, but it's also a place where you can gain the entrepreneurial mindset, and just connect with other people, realizing that you're not alone in this journey, especially if you're a solo founder. And so I think the importance of expanding your network is something that we stress.
No, and I think it's wonderful to kind of really focus on the community aspect. There are so many companies that are already established, and the founders are trying to seek that mastermindish, for lack of a better description of it. But the fact that you have a safe space to go to and say, I'm having this problem, or I'm having a great time and I want to celebrate with somebody, and these
Mm-hmm.
are the right people to celebrate. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
So we started talking about a little bit about how you don't take equity, which led to a little bit of our fundraising question. But I got some more fundraising questions because it's still something that's really like a prime thing, right? So I want to talk about it a little bit more, in that a lot of startups I come across myself, they're really preoccupied with fundraising. Some see it as a cure all. Some see it as like they have to do it because everyone else is doing it. What would you tell like a founder, like an early stage founder that you're working with, or someone who's getting there, when they come up with this fundraising question to you?
Yep. So I asked them a couple of things, but like the first few things that come to mind are really, why do you need to fundraise? Like, what does this mean to you? Do you have an understanding of how much money you need? What is it for? What do you have currently? If you just have a pitch deck, like, let's work a little harder. And do you really understand why you're fundraising and why you're going down this path and what venture capital means, and all of these things? So I think there's just a little bit of trying to get some context, and get an understanding for where they're at in their kind of understanding of the fundraising landscape. Because I think a lot of people, we see it most of the time, one of the reasons people come to us is they want help with the pitch deck of fundraising. And so it's like drilling down into that a little bit more and being like, well, have you done the real work, of understanding, the problem solution, your value proposition, who your customer is? We cover all of that in the first month before we will even talk about fundraising. And I think a lot of people are surprised at how much work they actually have to do because all of that will help you with your pitch deck, with your pitch, with finding out, who you should be talking to. But it can also help you in figuring out, oh, maybe there is a low fidelity way to build a prototype to get my first customer. Or maybe this isn't actually a tech solution. Maybe I can do this in some other different way. And so the other thing I try to focus them on is like, what have you done to generate $1? Like, who is your first customer? How are you going to get them? I think there are so many things that you could and should be doing that don't really factor into like the fundraising path, but specifically the venture capital fundraising path. And it's, do you have an idea of what you're trying to build? And I think oftentimes people have this huge vision of all these different products and services, and that, it's for everybody. But can we drill down into that a little bit more and really understand, like, what's the problem that you're solving? Who has that problem? How much will they pay for it? Could you get them to pay for something to solve this right now? And sometimes it's a matter of them doing something manually, and being like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, that there's no tech solution, but they're just it's Google Sheets and, all of that. But it allows them to understand, the customer process and what's working, and what their product truly is. And so I think that there is just, let's set the fundraising conversation aside and let's dig into your actual business, because that's what I care about. And then if we can get you to a point where it seems like that makes sense, we want to give you the education on the landscape. So we'll do a funding pathways conversation of, here are all the different ways that, you can raise money to support your business. Venture capital is one of those ways, but it's also the most expensive way. As you mentioned, giving up equity in your company, that's an expensive loss for you as a founder. Whereas there are other ways that either cost you nothing, like a grant, or debt, which cost you, a small percentage, but you'll pay off pretty quickly. But like, what type of company are you building, and which pathway makes the most sense for you? I think they're just like some underlying conversations that I try to have and dig into before we really have the conversation around, like, who should you be pitching to?
Right, and I know you've been part of that communication and getting that messaging account about alternate ways to fundraise.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just give us a little snippet of, like, you mentioned a lot of people don't know. I mean, people have realized about grants this year, but how like grants can help a for-profit business.
Yep.
Maybe they're a social enterprise or something like that. But also maybe we could just, I know you have some ideas on crowdfunding as well, so maybe we could just
Yeah.
let the world know about that stuff.
Yes. So there's actually a really great Medium article that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Geffen Skolnick, who I know you know, that would be helpful to include in your show notes. But it's, what are all the ways that you can raise money for your startup that are not venture capital? And I think it's still, to me, so surprising when people read that. They're like, I had no idea. I'm like, great, this is the point of being able to share this information with you. So yes, grants, I think, a lot of people think about grants as being for only nonprofit organizations, but this year in particular, but even, before, I think there are lots of either corporations or foundations who have a corporate social responsibility element, that they want to support founders, that they want to support women founders, people of color founders. It could be in any area of interest that they have and wanting to support and grow. I actually just shared a skincare brand that I use has a foundation, and every year they give away grants to female founders that are doing something in health, wellness, sustainability, and it's anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000. And that may not seem like a lot to people, but when you think about what that could do, that's several months of a marketing campaign to acquire new customers. That's the first, prototype for a physical garment that you're trying to produce. That could even be an MVP if you did something, for like a technical product, very simply. And so I think it's just thinking about, like, where could being creative and opening and expanding your mind of, like, what could this money actually do for me, and how would I actually spend it, versus thinking like, well, people are raising, $300,000, $5 million, like, how is this going to get me anywhere? But I think when you think about that, it could actually get you, pretty far, at least into like the next iteration. So I think grants, there are a couple of grant databases that I'm happy to send you links to that you can include, that are also listed in that article. And just, brands all the time are often offering them. I think particularly, during the past few months, because of the emphasis on Black Lives Matter, there were a lot of organizations specifically supporting Black founders and Black female founders. And so I think it's been great to see the additional support for these communities that have the hardest time obtaining outside capital, whether it's loans or funding or whatever it might be. So I'm happy to see that. There are alternate venture capital models as well. And so Indie VC is one of them. They have a unique kind of twist on the model where instead of straight up exchanging capital for equity, they're really focused on more sustainable growth companies. So they're not expecting you to be this billion-dollar unicorn and this like growth at all costs model. It's really like they want to accelerate what's already working for you as a business. So you have to have some revenue already, but they just want to help kind of stoke the fire versus pouring a ton of gasoline on it and helping you grow at a sustainable, healthy rate. And if at the point that you're able to potentially like buy back that money from them, then you can do that. If you end up raising a round, then that converts to equity. So I think it's more flexible for founders. And then equity crowdfunding has become really big lately. So there's the more, I think that the traditional type of crowdfunding that people know about, like the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos, where great for marketing or maybe getting your first product or prototype together. It's, somebody donates $25 and they get a t-shirt to support you and your business growth. But more recently, equity crowd investing platforms like Republic and Start Engine and WeFunder have come about to, one, I think, try to get more people investing. So you can, typically to invest in a company, you have to be an accredited angel investor or venture capitalist. But with these types of platforms, for as little as $100, you can invest in a startup or a brand or a new company. And so it's like this huge network of angel investors that you get access to help you grow your business. And so I think it's again, another great opportunity to another model for obtaining capital for your business. And then there are the more traditional lines of lending and debt that you can talk to either banks or, the SBA or the small business development centers that can help connect you through. They're typically supporting small businesses So those are definitely options as well. So I think that there are a growing number, including things like pitch competitions. Again, it's like, being able to get yourself out there. A lot of them have some sort of prize at the end of it. Could be 5,000, could be 50,000. So you get exposure on top of that. And I think especially right now, because we're in this virtual world, there's a lot more opportunities to do that, but you don't have to be in a specific location to do that. So we're seeing people that would typically do a, geographic specific, for LA only pitch competition, you have to be here to do it. Kind of being able to say, well, why should we restrict it, geographically? Sure. Why can't this be for anybody? And so, being able to live in Iowa or somewhere else in the Midwest and have access to these types of opportunities. I think it's really great to see what the virtual kind of nature of our work has created in terms of opportunities.
No, that's super cool. And we'll definitely link to the Medium article in the show notes. So it's definitely something that you should, if you're a startup out there, or if you're a company that's looking for additional funding, it is a great summary of potential, like Miki gave you. Actually, she gave you a good rundown already, but you want a little bit more detail, go into that article. But yeah, we'll definitely put that in there. So I want to go back to our founders and then talk about any type of founders, and usually founders and owners in general sometimes have that sense of overwhelm, right? They're just mm-hmm. they're trying to handle one of our early episodes. One of our founders, actually, she said, you're the CEO, you're the chief everything officer. So it means that you're doing everything. And then we layer it with, the pandemic. We layer it with COVID-19. We layer it with we have an upcoming national election. We also have, there's again these systemic issues going on with racism and people getting unjustly killed and stuff like that. So how do you help? What would you if you have a founder come to you? Before I would say, well, you'd meet up with them, but you have a founder come to you and they say, they're going through a lot of things, and then all of a sudden maybe the businesses, they're like, you know what, I can't do it anymore. How would you you guide one of your founders through it?
Sure. I mean, sometimes unfortunately that is just simply the case, right? I think this year is asking so much of everybody that I'm surprised that most people are, continuing to function as they are. I've had moments myself where it's hard. And I think it's nothing like any of us have ever experienced in our lifetime before. And I think it starts with just in yourself, giving yourself grace. And if you need to take a time out, if you need to call it a day, if you need to, find whatever moments of joy that you can, whether that be, I have dogs, so I will often, they're my at-home therapy if I need it, or going for a walk. And I mean, these are very simple things, but I think it's trying to find just that in this moment for today, how can I get through this? But sometimes it is seemingly impossible. We've had businesses that we've tried to come up with creative solutions for what about this, or what about this, or what about this? And it's just, they're dealing with being home with their kids and who are trying to navigate, virtual schooling, and their business was a physical location that has all these severe limitations around it. And sometimes you may just need to think about maybe it is best just to wind this down, in this time, if there is no conceivable way forward. And sometimes even though that's not what everybody wants to hear, sometimes, unfortunately, that is potentially the best case. As an accelerator, we've seen companies literally accelerate their growth or accelerate their demise. But the acceleration of the demise is often met with relief or acceptance, because it was a decision that if they had not gone through this program, if they had not been able to poke the holes in their business, or gotten the support that they needed in this short period of time, they may have continued on for months or years and still be, in the same position. But because they came to the decision at the end of the program, they were at peace with this decision of, it just isn't for me. My heart is not in this, move on and find what that next thing is for you. And so I think it's, each case is different, and my support speech And cheerleader mode will be different for each person, kind of based off of their circumstances. But sometimes people just need someone to listen to. I think particularly now, especially the isolation, being at home, this virtual aspect sometimes can be really difficult, I think, for people to feel seen. And I think sometimes that's all somebody who is struggling with something. They just want to feel seen. They want to know that someone's listening. They're not necessarily looking for suggestions or what your ideas are. They just want to know that there's somebody on the end that can validate, like, everything that you're feeling is 100% valid. And I'm just here to tell you that.
No, that's important. The idea of listening and just being there. Because I mean, I've been in that same situation where it's kind of like we have to either have a little bit more challenging conversations as to where we're going to go, and is it viable or not? How much pain can someone endure? But this whole thing's been interesting as well. Even for myself, it's like a client I'll talk to a client and they'll be like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, today I'm not doing too great." And I've never done that before. You try to keep you try to keep your code and you try to keep your shield up. And I was like, you know what? Today's wasn't a good day, or yesterday wasn't a good day, but I'm feeling better today. But thank you for asking. It's like it's an interesting thing, but it's great to reinforce that. I think you led with, give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself and understand that it's okay. I do want to focus a little bit more on founders in terms of, I want to ask you, because I have a feeling that this is something that your program does for your founders, is get them to a less is more type of mind state. I don't want to call it a mind state, but, kind of saying, you mentioned earlier in our talk about, like, well, everyone wants to, they want to solve the world's problems and they have this whole suite of products coming out. But how do you get a founder or a team to kind of focus on, let's just get out there. We just need one thing to get out there. Don't worry, you'll get your suite of products soon. How do you do it? How do you do the less is more?
So we focus and prioritization, I think, are two really important elements for founders. It can be, it's hard for anybody just in general to focus and prioritize on things, right? Like you, me, we probably all have issues with it. But I think that if you can be coached on it, or just be able to sit through, we have a couple of modules on it, whether it pertains to goal setting or just pertains to, again, like, building your product. It's called a minimum viable product for a reason. So your MVP, right? It's what is the least that you can build in order to be able to get it out there and it's usable and to start getting feedback on it. And so we really focus on, like, the lean startup methodology and being able to put something out there, test, get feedback, iterate, and it's a constant cycle. It's not this, build in secrecy and then launch and then expect it, to have hundreds of customers if you haven't talked to customers before and got, testing and all of that. I think at the earliest stage, which is where we work with founders, we want founders to focus on doing one thing and doing it really, really well. One of my teammates and one of our co-founders, Justin Wolski, who facilitates a lot of our sessions, says that you need to delight your customers. You want to just, like, smack them over the head with how amazing, this thing, like, where has this been all of my life? And to get that kind of reaction from somebody, that's when you know that you have something, and then you just build off of that. You can have this huge vision for the company that you're trying to build with all these products and services, or like how you're trying to systematically change the world with what you're doing, but you can't get there until you get the one thing right. So it's like, left, right, repeat, like start with this, like, thing in front of you, and then figure out, what the rest of the roadmap looks like.
Very nice. I think that's great, because I think that it's a reminder that we all need to have when we're developing something or we're working on a product or working on a service to provide. One thing I want to talk about, can you give us some insight? You launched something new this year, South LA. Let's talk about it.
So we have been talking for a while about launching a program in South LA. So since we started, we were hyper local focused on downtown LA and kind of like downtown adjacent startups. And then as we started to run more programs, we started just seeing interest from our programs coming from all over the city. So both being a vertical agnostic and accepting any type of business, we started to see companies coming from, all over the region, really interested. But the activity has always been in downtown, kind of exposing downtown to people that maybe, weren't aware of it. Also, I live in downtown, so it was easier for me to have our headquarters here. But we've had a partnership with the mayor's office since the very beginning of our organization. And Mayor Garcetti has had a priority interest in supporting entrepreneurs in specific areas of Los Angeles, South LA being one, Boyle Heights being another, and Pacoima being another. And so areas that are often overlooked, that have so much potential, and where this, economic development could really support and uplift the communities there. And so in talking to them, and even just seeing, we've been involved with a couple of initiatives that have taken place in South LA, like Plug-in South LA's Urban Tech Connect. They have an annual conference that actually just happened last week. And we saw so much innovation and creativity and amazing entrepreneurs there, but just not enough consistent resources being provided to them. So, we wanted to pilot and see. We feel like we've been fairly successful with our model here. Could we expand that and bring these programs to South LA with support of some other stakeholders that were there and other partners to do this together? And so we were able to do that this summer. So we brought on a phenomenal leader in Austin Clements, who is the managing director for Grid110 South LA, to really helm the expansion into South LA. We worked with 20 incredible companies. We had a very short time frame to get the application process off the ground. I think we only had a 3-week application window when we normally have 6 to 8 weeks. We got close to 100 applications, picked what we felt were the 20 best companies who were an incredible joy to work with. Again, through the pandemic, all virtual. It was unfortunate because the point of this program was to bring this program and build this community physically in South LA. But we had to, we had a space partner in Vector 90. We were really excited about doing stuff there, but because of limitations, had to do it virtually. And I think that from what I've heard, the only con or that was unanimous was we wish we could have met in person. We wish that, we all could have been together. But I think it was just great that we were still, again, able to offer the program. And so we're doing it again this winter. So we'll be running our second South LA cohort this winter, January of 2021. The really exciting thing about this particular program is it's in partnership with Pledge LA, which is an initiative between the Annenberg Foundation, the Mayor's Office, and the venture and startup communities to really measure and benchmark the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts of the venture community and the startup community. What do your hiring practices look like? How do your employees feel? Do they feel included? Do they feel like they have opportunity? A bunch of different things that they are measuring through an annual survey that they do. And then being able to provide actionable resources once we've measured that benchmark of what needs to be improved and how can we improve it. So I think over 200 venture companies, venture funds, and startups have signed this pledge and really wanting to unite around this theme. And so one of the activities that's come out of that is we are partnering with Pledge LA to do this joint program. It's called the Pledge LA Fund for South LA Founders. And it includes the program that we typically run, but also for 20 companies, they will receive $25,000 in a non-dilutive equity-free grant. And again, that, the equity-free, component being really important because we are looking at all different types of businesses, and these aren't necessarily going to be tech companies. They could be small businesses. They could be something in between. Again, being able to retain ownership of your company as a Black or Latinx founder is really important. And this is a starting point for them. They could go on and raise additional funding afterwards, but it's, what could $25,000 do to catalyze your business and take it to the next level? So we're really excited to be able to partner with the Annenberg Foundation, with Pledge LA, and to offer funding for the first time ever, in conjunction with one of our programs.
It's super exciting. That sounds super exciting. So when can people start submitting applications for the
So
or is it already
we're
done?
we're nearing the end of our application window right now. So the applications will close October 8th,
Oh
which
yeah.
is next week. So depending on when you air this, you
Yeah,
might cut this part out.
folks. Hope for a summer program or a
Yeah.
spring program. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
but
not
I mean,
we're not gonna get this. Yeah.
but I think that hopefully at least people being able to understand and learn about Grid110 and what we do. Sign up for our newsletter. We do offer a ton of different resources, events. We'd like try to amplify other things that are going on in the city, other programs even. And so even if we don't have an open application window, somebody else does, and hopefully we're sharing about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure, because there'll be other opportunities, and like you said, you help guide people in other spaces as well. So what if I can ask you, what's inspiring you right now? Could be a
That's a great
podcast, it could be a
question.
book, could be a great movie you saw.
Maybe this sounds a little cliche, but the founders that I get to work with, I think just seeing, we talked about the word resilient came up earlier because of COVID, but I think you have to be resilient as an entrepreneur, not during COVID. I think it's a very difficult thing to step into that I don't think a lot of people anticipate how hard it's going to be, and requires a lot of resilience and grit and resourcefulness to just make it through, let alone be successful in it, and whatever success means for you. And so I think just seeing, the companies that are able to launch out of a program, the companies that literally come into the program with an idea and launch a product at the end of it, if they're able to do something like that, the ones that are getting funding, the ones that are doing things that are incredibly community oriented, that, a separate thing, or it's an aspect of their business and they're wanting to do something, whether it's donations or community service or something that is just really furthering efforts of their own communities. I think it's so incredible to see what they are able to do. And I always tell them that I'm honored to be a part of their journey and to, in the little way that I might be able to help them to see and witness what they're able to do as a result of this program, this community, of the broader LA ecosystem. It's continually inspiring for me.
And I think that's a great way for us to kind of almost conclude, because I want to know how, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Yeah. So me personally, I am a digital extrovert. So I hate going to networking events, but I love engaging, as I see you do on Twitter. So Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So I'm at Mixter on all social handles, and then Grid110 is at Grid110. So you can follow us on social and sign up for our newsletter on our website, grid110.org, and hope to connect with more founders. I think it's such an unfortunate time, but it's also exciting, I think, in general, to be creating new opportunities, to be building businesses. And if there's any way that we can help, or if I personally can help, I'm more than happy to do so.
Well, thank you for that. And Miki, thank you for sharing some time with us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Until next time, BizMode family, this is your host, Alex Bruno, Bruno Group Inc., BizMode podcast. Keep your family first. Always strive for perfection. Don't forget, none of this is legal advice. By the way, what happened to peace? Peace.